What's an unsolved mystery that you find yourself thinking about regularly? Story 1. Daniel Robinson. He went out into the field to take a water level measurement on a well near Buckeye, Arizona in June 2021. He hasn't been seen since. They found his vehicle in a ravine in the desert. His dad flew in from out of state and hired a private investigator and refuses to go home until he finds his son. I think about him at least once a week. Story 2. Local ones. Heidi Seaman. A girl my age who disappeared walking home from a birthday party. Erica Botello, who disappeared the same year. Lena Sardar Kill, daughter of refugees, who disappeared from an apartment complex playground just a few years ago, but mostly Lupita Cantu, whose case showcases such stunning police incompetence and sexism I am still aghast. In short, she was kidnapped and murdered, but because she was seen driving her minivan with her presumed abductor, police decided she had simply run off and refused to investigate any further. Her body was actually found in a neighboring town 3 weeks later, obviously a homicide victim, brought back to San Antonio for an autopsy, but not identified because, again, she wasn't considered a missing person by the police. She was ultimately buried in a pauper's grave, unidentified for 20 years, and when her identity was eventually pieced together, they exhumed her, and there was a man in the grave. Not Lupita, they simply misplaced her. There's exactly zero chance her murder will ever be solved because of all of this, and I remain angry for her family. Story 3. I forgot the name, but the one where an unknown man returned a murder victim's car back to her apartment parking lot, and there was a fence obscuring his face from the only camera that was directed towards the area. Straight out of the movie Frailty almost. Edit, Jennifer Kessie as seen below. Story 4. Whenever people bring up JFK, I always think about the theory that Oswald fired shot 1, which causes a Secret Service member to pull their gun out, and then fires shot 2, which spooked the agent who fired, and no-scoped JFK from 20 away in the back of the head. Explains the whole 2 or 3 shot thing, why Jackie was terrified of the Secret Service after, and why everyone involved was super quiet. Story 5. I really want to know what Jesus was actually like. I wonder about it all the time. Was he a peaceful hippie type, a political instigator, a cult leader, a con man? I am not Christian, so I don't believe a lot of the more magical stories. I would love to know the truth on where they came from. Story 6. Shergar, a famous and successful British racehorse in the 80s who was stolen from his stud farm and ransom of €2 million demanded. His final photo sent by the thieves is out there on the internet somewhere, and it's quite unsettling. You can see that he's terrified in the photo. The ransom was not paid. Negotiations came to a halt and the horse was never seen again. It's obviously assumed he was killed in the end, but much of the story remains a mystery. Story 7. When I was 4, my older sister and cousin were supposed to watch me while Dad worked in his office. They got distracted pinching each other and I wandered off. From my dad's POV, he came out of his office to check on us, and right at that moment, I came walking down the hallway to them with a confused expression on my face. Meanwhile, they were horrified and panicked because I somehow nicked a vessel just above my collarbone and was bleeding out. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel pain. I was just confused. There was no sound indicating what might have happened. The only thing I remember is being swaddled in a mountain of blankets, put in the back of the car, and watching the scenery outside the car window zoom by before blacking out. We still have no idea what happened. Story 8. Stephen Douglas Reed. We went to college together and were friends in the sense that he didn't really have friends, but we hung out with the same group of people. In 1999, 2 years into medical school, he bought a $100,000 life insurance policy, named his parents as beneficiaries, flew to Portland to go hiking, walked into the wilderness, and was never found, seen, or heard from again. Thing is, I don't know a single person who knew Steve who believes he died in the wilderness. We all believe he disappeared to change his identity. He's probably the only person I've ever known who was smart enough to pull it off. I truly wonder what happened to him. Story 9. I wouldn't say I think about these regularly, but whenever discussions about mysteries, these are who come to mind. Ross Warren. He was my local newsreader. It was quite shocking, and it makes me sad thinking about his parents' anguish. Melissa Caddick. Her foot washed up in a shoe at a beach, about 90 minutes away from where I grew up, and the subsequent investigations have raised more questions than answers. Madeleine McCann. I just hope her suffering was short, but obviously, had it be better that there was none in the first place. But all the other children that go missing that don't get given the same relentless media coverage. If I was a parent of a missing child, I'd want wall-to-wall coverage, so I get it. But it must also sting the millions of families that struggle to get much coverage. John Benet Ramsey. I cannot reconcile that ransom note. I think the family were involved, but I cannot come to a firm conclusion as to who and how it happened. Story 10. St. Louis Little Doe. First, anyone that does not know of the case. In 1983, some men went into an abandoned building looking for scrap metal. One of them lit up a lighter to see in the dark. He noticed a beheaded body on the ground. When the police got there, they believed that it could have been a prostitute. But upon turning the body over, they realized that the girl had not gone through puberty yet and was just a child. She was bound and had a yellow sweater on. After investigating for a while and coming up with no leads, the police sent the sweater and the rope to a psychic in Florida, and it was supposedly lost in the mail. The case is still cold to this day with no new leads. Story 11. I want to know the extent of esoteric/mystical/magical practice is involved in the upper layers of entertainment, marketing, and politics. It's clear that there are various groups representing various beliefs or powers pulling strings in the fabric of society, and I want to see how deep or how high up it goes. Story 12. Not entirely unsolved, but more that there are very reasonable explanations that we will just never have confirmed because of the circumstances. The Roanoke colony in the early colonization of the Americas seemingly up and disappeared one day, with no signs of violence, and many of the personal effects of the people in the colony left undisturbed, as if every person there had all vanished within a moment all at once. No sign that anything at all had happened, except for a word carved into a tree at the location that suggested they had fled to a nearby settlement, although they were never found. Now, of course, there are reasonable explanations for this. Perhaps the colony was raided by the natives who managed to round up the colonizers without leaving any signs of violence. Perhaps the colony had to evacuate suddenly due to predators in the area, lack of resources or other reasons, and the people all settled elsewhere and never returned. But it seems odd so many people would leave so many of their belongings behind. Story 13. When I was very little in rural Missouri, we lived down the road from a nice old man I only ever knew as Mr. Jones. He had horses and an old wagon he used to take my mom and I on rides with. One evening, he was sitting on the front porch with my dad, and we heard him say, "If I ever up and disappear, don't bother looking for me. I'm probably at the bottom of a pond." My timeline is unclear because I was only 5 or 6, but Mr. Jones did go missing soon after, and I don't think he was ever found, or even a big fuss made about it. His house was on the way to my grandmother's, so I watched his empty old place crumble and be taken over by nature as I grew up. Another wild backwoods story. We used to leave our house unlocked when we went to my grandma's because that was apparently just a thing you did in the 80s. For a while, whenever we came home, our VCR would be on, the ceiling fan would be on, and the little black and white TV in my parents' bedroom would be moved to the bathroom counter. It finally creeped my mom out enough that we started locking front door. No more issues. We lived in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods, and knew all our distant neighbors. Who the hell was chilling in our house while we weren't home? Story 14. It wasn't national news, but having met the parents of the victim, I think about it quite often. Bambi Lynn Dick of Davenport, Iowa, went to a Quiet Riot concert in 1983. Her mother believed her friends she went to the show with knew something. In 2009, a body was matched, which had been a Jane Doe in Texas. Her mother died shortly after telling me about this. Her father died a few years later. This is pretty much all we know about it. There are so many questions that her parents had for the rest of their lives, questions her brother still has, questions that haunt me even though my relation to the case is minimal. Story 15. Everything the ancient Egyptians built, their accuracy, their carvings in granite, the paintings done in semi-darkness, the weight of the blocks moved, and if the pyramids had a golden tip, how was it taken up there given the weight and the incline angle? Please don't say aliens, for that is just dumb. Story 16. The murder of Kevin Kluwer. Kevin is family on my mother's side. In March 2004, Kevin went to a nightclub with one of his friends and met a stranger called Fernando. Kevin and Fernando seemed to have some chemistry and went somewhere together. Kevin's friend never saw him again. The next day, Kevin didn't turn up to work, so his father went to his apartment to check up on him. Kevin's car was parked outside, but when Kevin did not open the door, his father forced his way in. Jim found Kevin in his bedroom. He had been stabbed in the back 42 times. Even though Kevin's killer left forensic evidence, and there are eyewitness descriptions of Fernando, the police have never located him, and no arrests have been made in Kevin's case. Sadly, Kevin's parents both passed away the following year. It's almost 20 years since Kevin was killed, And while there have been some leads, his killer has never been found. Story 17, Fred the Head John Doe case in the UK near me. Probably because I know someone local who looks strikingly similar to the facial reconstruction of the doe, and that someone is trying to find out who their real dad was, and that someone was born within the window of time that Fred was believed to have died. And it's weighing on my conscience because I know the person doing a podcast investigation into the case, and I know I should say something, but it's a dilemma because complications, ramifications, I've already said too much. So, yeah, that's probably why I think about it regularly. And I fucking hate it. I wish I never got interested in that case. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm scared. What if I'm not? Story 18. Honestly, just ghosts and the afterlife in general. A ton of cultures have ancestors, spirits, guides, ghosts, and then angry or stuck versions of those too. Too many people through history from different religions, different races, different genders, different financial backgrounds, different countries, you name it, have seen them and seen the afterlife during accidents, and seen their relatives appear in front of them right before they die. In fact, I hear it's not only a thing, but a pretty common occurrence in hospice to have people see their family coming for them. As much as I don't know if I believe all the stories about scary ghosts that go boo in the night, it seems implausible to write off all of it as superstitions. There are some explanations like carbon monoxide, alcohol, drugs, anything that can alter or impair you can lead you to see things, including death or the fear of death. But that being said, people who are perfectly healthy can also see ghosts. I don't know, it almost seems more likely to me that there is something. And if there is, it would bring into question the entire principle of physics and science as we know it, and put questions about gods up into the conversation. Just a lot to think about, so I think about it often. Edit. I've got another one. Where the hell did all those missing nukes go that people have lost over the years? I know some are speculated in the oceans, another on top of a snowy mountain, but I can't remember which one. We just won't know until they pop. Scary stuff. Story 19. D.B. Cooper was 43 when we first heard his name 47 miles away from where he fell down to his fame. He told me that the hardest part wasn't really jumping out of that plane. It was spending the night watching those lights shine through the pouring rain. They had a manhunt that next morning like nothing I had ever seen. I was only 8 years old at the time, watching on the TV screen. They were saying he was never going to make it now. Now the daylight had set in. But later that night, they were shining lights. Down on the mountain again, not far away from the City of Roses, they all watched those lights up through the rain. For D.B. Cooper, well, the cops blocked off all the exit roads, and they turned out all of the hounds. They even dragged the river up a couple of times to see if he had drowned. With all those men working overtime, they swore they would bring him down, but a parachute and a few $100s was all that they ever found. Not far away from the City of Roses, they all watched those lights up through the rain. Now, some people say that he died up there, somewhere in the rain and the wind. Other people say that he got away, but then his girlfriend did him in. The law men say if he is out there, someday they're going to drag him in. But as for me, I hope they never see D.B. Cooper again. Not far away from the City of Roses, lights shine from a house out in the rain. It was D.B. Cooper, drinking champagne.